What if you could challenge what you believe and come out stronger?
Ooh, interesting.
Start now at navigatingbeliefs.com.
So it's like they're almost daring you, right?
Yeah, like, do you
But
have the guts to really examine your beliefs?
I like it. Keeps you on your toes.
All right, hey everyone, welcome in. We're diving deep today, and get this, it's all thanks to you.
Is that right?
Yeah. See, we got this question from a listener, and it's about, all this buzz around street epistemology and whether it's like changing or maybe even getting a whole new name.
Intriguing, yeah.
So we figured, hey, why not dedicate a whole deep dive to this? Because let's face it, this isn't just some random philosophical debate.
It's not.
It's about how we think.
It's changed a lot over the years.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved. It's interesting because you might think this is just some philosophy stuff.
Yeah.
But it goes way beyond just like, old textbooks. It's become super relevant to how we talk about all those hot button issues.
Yeah.
All the things that people are always arguing about these days.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So street epistemology, we'll just call it SE. I mean, it's not just about like religion, is it? What kind of led to this shift?
Well, it's funny because in the early days, SE was really focused on challenging religious beliefs.
Yeah.
It was almost like a tool that atheists used. But now it's being used for pretty much anything that people feel strongly about. Politics, conspiracy theories, even personal values. So it's pretty wide open now.
Wow, that's a big change. So from religion to basically everything.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, in the early days, SE was really heavily influenced by a guy named Peter Boghossian. He wrote this book called A Manual for Creating Atheists. And it really, helped to make SE popular. But the focus back then was really on using a specific line of questioning, to get people to really think about their faith.
So instead of like debating whether God exists, it's more about helping people think about how they came to believe in God in the first place.
Exactly. And, that approach definitely made some people upset, but it laid the groundwork for what SE is today. The big change was moving away from just targeting one specific belief like religion and focusing more on how beliefs are formed in general.
Oh, okay, I see. So from like, is there a God to like, how do we know anything is true?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's a huge leap.
Yeah.
Would that make it like harder to actually use though? Because how do you even begin to like unpack someone's entire belief system?
Well, that's where the SE community comes in. As Boghossian kind of stepped back from being the main guy, the movement became less about him and more about this network of people all over the world.
So less about one person and more about like a global group of people.
Exactly. And with all these different voices and perspectives, SE naturally expanded to include a lot more beliefs and ways of using it.
That makes sense.
It's not just about debating facts anymore, like is climate change real or not?
Yeah.
That was a big focus early on.
Hold on, you're saying it's not just about facts.
Well, now it also looks at what we call normative beliefs.
Normative beliefs.
Yeah, these are beliefs about values, like what should be, not just what is. So think about ethical debates, political ideologies, even personal values, like what it means to be a good person.
So now it's getting into really subjective stuff.
Exactly.
Things like, is free speech always good?
Yeah.
Or what does it even mean to live a good life?
Yeah, all those big questions.
No wonder people are getting so interested in SE. I mean, it seems like pretty much every argument these days comes down to these really fundamental differences in values.
You're absolutely right. And that shift towards looking at normative beliefs is exactly why SE is so relevant today. I mean, these conversations are happening everywhere, online and offline.
Yeah, for sure. But what about the community itself? How has that shaped the way people actually do street epistemology? You mentioned it's not just one leader anymore, but like, it's not a club with membership cards, right?
No, not quite. It's more like a network of people who share resources, do workshops, have discussions online. It's very open and accessible.
So like a grassroots movement.
Exactly. You don't need a PhD in philosophy to use these techniques.
That's great. So anyone can join in and learn.
Pretty much. There are tons of resources online,
Yep.
videos, YouTube channels, all dedicated to teaching people how to apply SE in their everyday conversations.
That's
And it's not just about spreading information. It's also about making the method itself better. In fact, one of the biggest changes has been in the tone of the conversations.
Oh, you mean how those early SE encounters sometimes felt a bit like an interrogation?
Yeah, sometimes. Early on, SE had a bit of a reputation for being confrontational, almost like a debate tactic where the goal was to win and prove the other person wrong.
Yeah, I've seen some of those old videos.
Right.
Definitely not a very friendly vibe. So how has the approach changed?
Well, modern SE practitioners have shifted away from trying to dismantle someone's beliefs and moved towards being genuinely curious.
So less about like tearing down and more about building up.
Exactly. It's more about truly listening to understand how someone arrived at their conclusions, what experiences or information shaped their thinking.
So less gotcha and more help me understand.
Right.
But doesn't that make it less effective? I mean, if you're not challenging their beliefs directly, how can you help them see things differently?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Instead of that direct confrontation, imagine asking questions like, what makes you so sure about that?
Mhm.
Or, what would it take for you to reconsider your view?
Okay, so those are very different types of questions.
Yeah, these questions encourage self-reflection, which is actually a far more powerful tool for change.
So it's about nudging people to examine their own thought process, not just attacking the belief itself. And
Okay.
that's where the psychology of belief comes in.
Absolutely. And there's some really interesting tools and techniques that practitioners use to facilitate this kind of self-reflection. Things like confidence scales and harm impact spectrums.
Okay, those sound interesting. Before we dive into those, maybe we should take a step back for our listeners. For anyone who's maybe never even heard of street epistemology before, can we rewind a bit and explain, like, why is this shift towards curiosity and understanding? Why is that so important?
Sure. It all comes down to the fact that people rarely change their minds when they feel attacked or cornered. When we approach conversations with genuine curiosity and a willingness to understand the other person's perspective, it creates a much safer space for dialogue.
So it's like you're inviting them on a journey instead of dragging them kicking and screaming.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
But how do you make sure it doesn't just turn into everyone agreeing on the surface, but no one really changes their mind?
That's where those tools and techniques I mentioned come in. They help us go beyond simply stating our beliefs and dig deeper into the reasons behind them.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these confidence scales and harm impact spectrums. How do they actually work in a conversation?
Okay, so let's say you're talking to someone who believes in astrology. Instead of arguing about whether horoscopes are scientific or not, an SE practitioner might ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being no certainty at all and 10 being totally certain, how confident are you that astrology can accurately predict someone's personality or future?
Okay, I see. It's not about saying astrology is fake. It's about getting them to think about how strongly they actually believe it.
Exactly. And often, just having them put a number on their belief can get them thinking more deeply. They might realize they're not as sure as they thought, or they might start to consider what would make them more or less certain.
So it's like planting a seed of doubt, but in a more subtle way.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what about those harm impact spectrums you mentioned? How do those work?
So harm impact spectrums are helpful for exploring the potential consequences of a belief. For example, let's say someone believes that vaccines are dangerous. You could ask them to imagine a spectrum, with one end being no harm at all and the other end being extreme harm. Then you could ask, where on this spectrum would you put the potential harm of getting vaccinated? And where would you put the potential harm of not getting vaccinated?
I see. It's about getting them to think about the potential downsides of both options.
Right. And to compare those downsides in a more nuanced way.
I'm noticing a pattern here. These tools aren't about arguing about facts and figures. They're about encouraging people to think through the nuances and potential implications of their beliefs.
You got it. And that kind of nuanced thinking is often missing from those heated arguments we see online.
It's so easy to get caught up in proving our point and winning that we forget to actually listen and try to understand where the other person is coming from.
It's a natural human tendency. But SE helps us shift the focus from winning to understanding. And that opens up the possibility for a much more productive and empathetic conversation.
Yeah, that makes sense. This makes me think about how SE has adapted to the digital age. I mean, you can't exactly walk up to someone on the street in the comments section of a YouTube video.
True.
So how does SE work online?
Well, you can't do it literally, but the same principles still apply. And there are people who are really good at using SE techniques online, in forums, comment sections, even live streams.
That's right, like Anthony Magnabosco, right? He has
Yeah.
that YouTube channel where he talks to people about all sorts of beliefs, from flat Earth to conspiracy theories.
He's a great example. He's really good at applying SE in a way that's both engaging and makes you think.
Yeah.
And his work is important because it makes these conversations accessible to anyone with an internet connection.
That's a great point. It's not limited to chance encounters on the street or small workshops anymore.
Right.
People can watch real SE conversations happening, they can see the techniques in action, and they can even participate in virtual sessions from anywhere in the world.
It's really opened things up.
But I imagine there are also some unique challenges to doing SE online. I mean, the internet can be a pretty wild place.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Things like dealing with trolls, managing difficult conversations in public, setting boundaries. It's all more complicated online.
It must take a lot of skill to navigate those online spaces and still stay true to the principles of SE.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
But the potential benefits are huge. Imagine a world where online conversations were less about shouting matches and more about genuine curiosity and exploring different ideas.
That would be amazing. I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. SE isn't just about changing individual minds. It's about changing the way we talk to each other about important topics.
Yeah,
It's about creating a culture of respectful discourse, even when we disagree strongly.
exactly.
It's about finding common ground, even when it seems impossible.
And that's what makes SE so relevant today.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive into street epistemology, from its beginnings as a way to question religious beliefs, to its evolution into this versatile tool for navigating tough conversations in the digital age. It's clear that SE has a lot to offer. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, as you've seen SE change over time, what surprised you the most?
You know, honestly, what surprised me most is how adaptable it is. It's constantly being refined and used in new ways I never would have expected. Who would have thought a technique designed to question religious beliefs could be so effective for helping people talk about climate change or political polarization?
Yeah, that is surprising. It really shows you the power of curiosity, doesn't it?
Right.
When we genuinely want to understand, it just opens up so many more possibilities than if we're just trying to, like, win the argument.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And that gives me hope,
Yeah.
especially these days when it feels like everyone's just talking at each other instead of with each other.
I know what you mean.
Okay, why this potential name change then? Is street epistemology, like, broken somehow? Did it stop working?
That's a good question. It's not so much that it's broken. The core principles, they're still valuable, very much so.
Right.
But the name itself, it can feel a bit limiting.
Like it only happens on street corners. I'm picturing a guy with a soapbox.
Yeah, exactly. That image doesn't really capture the whole picture, does it? Navigating beliefs, it might better reflect how broad this really is. It's not just those one-on-one street conversations. It could be group discussions, online forums, even just, thinking things through on your own.
Okay, so navigating beliefs kind of implies it's more about exploring beliefs together, not just challenging them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But what does that actually look like? Like, give us a real-world example, something we can relate to.
Sure, sure. Imagine a team at work, and they're trying to make a decision, but they're stuck. Let's say they're arguing about whether to use some new technology.
It happens all the time.
Right. Instead of just fighting over which option is the right one, they could use these navigating beliefs techniques. They could start by, figuring out what each person's assumptions are about this technology.
Yeah.
What are their values related to the decision? Maybe one person's all about efficiency, while another one really wants to stick with what they know. By understanding those deeper motivations, they can get past those surface-level disagreements and actually find a solution that works for everyone.
So it's about getting to the why behind the what, right? For our listener out there who's clearly into this stuff and wants to use it, what's one thing they can start doing, like, today?
Here's a simple one, but it's powerful. Next time you're in a disagreement with someone, instead of jumping in with your own point, try asking them, "Help me understand why you see it that way."
Oh, I like that.
It's a subtle shift, but it can change the whole conversation. It shows you're genuinely interested in their perspective, and it creates space for a more, productive and respectful discussion.
It's almost like turning an argument into an exploration, right? Like you're both working together to figure things out.
Exactly.
It reminds me of that quote, I forget who said it, but it goes, "If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea."
Ooh, that's good.
Instead of just demanding agreement, you're inspiring a shared desire to explore, to understand.
Beautifully put.
Well, this has been awesome. Big thanks to our listener for sending in that question.
It really got us thinking.
It did.
For our listeners who are also feeling inspired to learn more, we've got you covered. We've put together a ton of resources in the show notes, links to websites, videos, online communities, all sorts of stuff to help you start exploring the world of street epistemology.
There's a lot out there.
So definitely check those out.
Yeah, it's a journey worth taking. And who knows, maybe if enough of us practice these techniques, we can help create a world where curiosity and respectful dialogue are more common.
That would be incredible. That's a world I definitely want to live in. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into street epistemology. Until next time, stay curious and keep those conversations going.